Alrighty, so we have a lot to go over in terms of progress for the vehicles, what we've been working on, the issues we're running into, and what remains. So right off the bat, we are going to start on the Ajaxes, and then from there, we're going to just kind of segue into the other progress we've had throughout the week. Derek, do you want to talk about some of the issues that you're working on with the Ajaxes? I'm sharing my screen.
There we go. I see it. I've been working on improving the vehicle behavior in general, but also just tweaking some of the settings for the Ajax in order to try to dial in the behavior a bit better, not only in terms of the just driving and the speed of them, so that they try to maintain a higher speed and believe that they can turn better at higher speeds, as well as trying to work on some turn assist, so that they're able to do a little bit better when they detect an obstacle nearby. You can also see something that Dimitri was working on a little bit, that if a lamppost does get dislodged, it now has a little snap off instead of it coming unlodged from the ground. It snaps off from the little base.
Let me go and hit one.
There we go. Okay, go and hit one. That's a I don't think the traffic lights are hooked up.
Oh, okay, let me go do that.
Street lights there. Yeah, so the traffic light there, he's just gonna get a little confused. There we go. You see it snaps off, it leaves a little base in the ground with a little particle effect, a little sound. So that's something Dimitri worked on.
We have to fix that dancing.
Doing some of the similar things here. It's dancing around a little bit there. There's some settings we can do to dampen the physics there, because right now that thing is acting light as a feather. But it's a step in the right direction. The Ajaxes themselves are able to obstacles at a higher speed now, and they're better able to detect things that actually are obstacles. I tried to do some tweaking on the brakes in order to improve their ability to brake, but didn't get that much juice out of it today. But though I did get some improvements on the turning. As we're approaching higher degrees of responsiveness on the CL reports can't hear the screen share audio inside of our comments here. Is the audio working?
Oh, that's fun.
Here. Okay, stream audio is on for me.
I don't know. We'll have to look into that.
Yeah, because I thought I had fixed most of that there, and I'm pretty sure you updated and you got all the updates there. So that's just strikes me as weird. Okay, so since Seal's reporting in the comment section that
there's no screen share audio. It's a limitation of Discord. Just continue. If you want to hear the audio, you have to watch it on YouTube.
Right, sorry. Gotcha. So outside of Discord, they'll be able to hear the audio on YouTube, but right now on Discord, you're not going to be able to. Most of the testing I've still been doing has been for solo vehicles rather than moving in formation, so there might be a little bit more freaking out when they're moving together. But one of the goals that I was working on recently was that I mentioned earlier was the higher initial speeds, so that they're able to handle turns at higher speeds, and therefore try to maintain higher speeds more often, so that they are not lagging behind at nearly human speeds a lot of the time that they were doing so before. Let's see. Earlier in the week as well, also a big part of the focus was improving some of their obstacle detection, because there were a couple of math issues that had remained and how they were handling obstacles.
They really don't like poles. Did you make some kind of bias so they hate poles or something? Did he have a bad day?
The opposite, actually. Well, it does seem like
it seems like they're almost, the trace is failing, and they're like, I could kill that. Hit it. Like, he's a little bit too on the nose for hitting those poles.
I need to investigate that. I updated their.
See, there it is.
When they're looking at
That's a catastrophic failure.
Oh. What in the world?
It's either bad object collision or bad tracing.
Strange, because when I was updating this earlier, I was getting it so that they were pretty nicely evading the Greyhound truck on the road that's south of the road that you're currently on. So I don't know why they're not evading those garbage trucks. I'll have to test on this road some more.
It's possible the formation actor is skewing it into basically crashing into objects to try and maintain their formation, and it's being too rigid. Because remember, most of these moves are all groups. So the moment you actually start doing a group, he's like, you gotta be in this spot. Go right there. And then he basically is just like, but I can't go there. And then they ram into it instead. So if we do the inverse and we do one at a time, let's see if he's just as suicidal.
He shouldn't be, because I've been testing with the single.
Sorry.
primarily, and the formation stuff hasn't been the moving multiple vehicles at the same time in this single move order has not been.
Yeah, I
the way
know.
I've
But
been
you do
focusing
one
on
at a
this.
time. I know.
So this should be smoother. Yeah, for them ramming into the lampposts unnecessarily, going out of their way to ram them, they shouldn't be doing that, because I set the lampposts to have roughly the same cost as off-road, so that they should be doing the obstacles as I can go
Yeah.
there, but I don't have to,
Yeah.
rather than I want to go there. So
Here's
I
the
don't know why
tongue
they're
twister
specifically
right
going
here.
out
If he
of their way to
rams
do
into
that.
this
It's
object, he
careful.
should slow down. Okay, he
They
slid.
do it.
He skid.
Hey, look at that. That was the big thing I was working on today, was moves like that around the Greyhound on the road south of this.
Yeah.
And it worked pretty well here too, because it was intelligent predictive behavior in regards to looking 2 path points ahead from where they are on the navigation to determine if a turn's coming up, and using that as an additional check for whether or not
Yes.
we should hit the brakes. And that seems to have worked pretty well there, because I've been testing primarily on the road south of here, because that had one of the nastier areas. Here comes another traffic.
Oh, no.
And you negotiate it. Okay, he turned way early there. Why did he turn early?
I'm not sure, but I'll have to clear it just to salvage the situation.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's a lot of these are complex issues in order to try to solve them, and when you solve one, it produce side effects in other areas. But it's continuously getting better. Especially if you compare it to
Oh, yeah.
last week. Fast talking, or is it just me? Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I'm sorry, Carmine, that's not you. I tend to talk rather quickly. I'll try to slow down a little bit. Sorry about that. Let's see. Additional information. I did some adjustments to the tires. Something we're going to be looking into somewhat soon is doing what Company of Heroes does, and adding some logic so that the vehicles in some situations will be able to rotate in place. While that's not 100% realistic,
We're gonna have to do it
something that
regardless.
you can
Because if
make
you
more
back into a thing, they're never
Yeah,
going to
it
get
will-
out. Company heroes can't figure it out. We can't figure it out. So it's as simple as just being realistic in terms of the scope of the game. Is that you figure it's still an RTS game at the end of the day, and it needs to function. It needs to work. So in certain cases, if you go into a one-way, they need to understand like they can rotate and turn out, or they can reverse. And it's going to be up to the AI in the case of like determining like, can I reverse out of this, or should I just rotate in place, like what Company Heroes and what the industry norm is for RTS games, to basically get out of the situation they got themselves into. That way, it would allow them a little bit more flexibility. As you can see right now, they're using the road nav, which is a huge improvement over Legacy. In Legacy, he would have just like, oh, let me just go through here and get to these trees and all this other stuff. So they prefer the road nav, and they'll stay on it as much as they possibly can. And that's one of the other major changes that we baked in this week, was all of the maps have their road nav in. So if I pause and show navigation, you can see some of the changes that are going on behind the scenes as Efren and Co. are basically auditing the levels and wait for it to load, because it's a huge strain on your CPU to render this mode. But you can see the blue is a road nav. Yellow is building avoidance nav. And we'll get into that in a second, because that's something else that's an initiative going on right now, is to basically have AI understand if you have to go near these buildings, do it. But otherwise, stay in the green, stay in the blue, because that's going to give you more distance from your enemies. And it's going to make it to where the infected and the CERC don't clog up on each other when they're turning a bend. They'll be more inclined to stay in the center medians, and basically, like, you know, it'll make them a lot more combat effective when it comes to targeting you. But anyway, back to you, Derek.
Yeah, you can also see from the navigation here that he's showing that there's little pink spots underneath the lampposts. Those are the little. This is an obstacle that a vehicle can go through, but a soldier cannot.
Yeah.
And there's going to be different layers of that for some of the tougher obstacles. You can see some of those stone walls on the right that have the purple underneath them. Those are going to get a different navigation area when we add the heavier classes here, so that things like the infected Juggernaut, as well as larger CERC vehicles, will be able to plow through those. So look forward to that when you're building your bases and using stone walls and you think the infected can't get through, because that.
Oh, there's a shader compile issue, I guess, there. We'll have to look into that.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily a shader compile issue. I think what was happening there was that when the navigation updates from you ramming into one of the lampposts.
Oh, you're right. It's showing the asynchronous build tile there. So every time I hit something, yeah, that's why they don't recommend you do it at the scale. So I got to turn that off.
Yeah, because otherwise
Yeah.
you're going to get very big.
So let me see if I can hit this.
Yeah, you can see here that even when he's giving move orders onto the sidewalk, he tries to stay on the road most of the way there, and then only.
Yeah, because like he's gonna disregard like me telling him to go inside that object. It's like, no, I'm not going over there. I'm gonna stay on the road.
Yeah, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to, so unless the move order is like right on top of it,
Yeah.
he wants to
So
just stick
that's
to the road.
another thing. What'd you say?
He
Let
will
me see
park
if I
on
can
the
get him on
sidewalk.
the sidewalk. Oh,
So
dang it! There we go.
yeah, he will park on the sidewalk, but if it's a long, there you go. If it's a long enough distance, though, he's gonna go on the road to
Yeah.
explore.
So that's one of the big things there. And then if I show nav, which you guys can do this in your SDK. So when you guys are loading into the game, you guys can use console commands to look to see what we're doing behind the scenes. But like if you notice, most of the objects have different like color markers, and you're gonna see some of those colors changing over the course going into next week. Because in an ideal world, we're trying to get to a point where like the oddities you saw with like this intersection and that intersection down there resolved by Tuesday, Wednesday. And then ideally we get to a point around Tuesday, Wednesday where where their failure rate is more acceptable. And then at that point, we're like going back and we're marking the trees and different objects within different area classes or weight classes to set the stage for heavier stuff like the Abrams, like the Striker, like the MRS, where, like in, say, Company of Heroes, like this has a special color because the Ajax knows it can't go through that object, but an Abrams is going to go right through it. So, like, that's what the colors are for. The colors let the Pathfinder know, oh, you can go through that. But, like, you figure, obviously, there are cases like this where it's like, this is a failure. 'Cause it's trying to reverse out. This is what I mean by, like, it'd be simpler just to have a rotate in place because no RTS game is as batshit crazy as we are. Where we have an object density as insane as our game. Like, you look at Halo Wars, you look at other RTSs that have really good Halo physics. Sorry, vehicle physics. Their maps are devoid of life. They're empty. So, and that's a weird physics. Yeah, that's an interpolation bug that happens sometimes that we have to look into. That's going to cause a hitch because it's going to. Yeah, that's the navigation asynchronous running. Let me just turn off the HLOD. Not HLOD, the navigation debugging. But that's one of the things where we're having to tackle and engineer an R&D a solution that basically is unique in our case because you figure we went the angle of having very dense, very populated cities. And by doing that, it astronomically balloons the time that you have to put into the Pathfinder to make sure that, like, okay, like, are we going to actually be able to get around the terrain? Are we going to be able to navigate? Are we going to make the proper decisions in turning? Like, that's what these spheres are. So if I bring up the debugger, let me see if I can show you guys. Hold on, I gotta like be in the right position. Hold on. Where'd my mouse go? Okay, so not that key. I gotta press equal, and then press that one, and then hold on. I'm pressing the wrong keys. There we go. Well, that'll work. Okay, so you can see kind of the debugger right there, where essentially it's showing what the vehicle is thinking at any given time, and you can see there are 12 points. It's on point 3. There's no obstacles detected at this point, and it's calculating via physics, like the drag and all the other aspects of the vehicle that determine like how it should make its decision making. So like, should it slow down? How much should it slow down? Is it going to drift? What's the algorithm associated with the physics to determine how much it is going to drift? And other variables that kind of muddy it up and make it to where it's not as like straightforward in terms of basically just fix it, because you figure there's a lot of different aspects that go into it that we're slowly but surely trying to improve over Legacy. What were you gonna say, Derek? I interrupted you.
Oh yeah, the one of the examples there, the little science sphere that projects forward, and you see it traveling in front of the vehicle for a little bit. That sphere is a projection showing where we'll be if we break it down to turning speed. As soon as we press the brakes, that's where we'll end up when we hit the point where we want to turn. So you'll see when that sphere reaches one of the little yellow spheres on the ground, that is right before a turn, the vehicle will start braking because it's like, oh, I want to make sure I'm at turning speed by the time I hit that yellow sphere. So you'll see when the turn's steep enough, it starts slowing down. There's also moments here when the path gets updated, whether because in Unreal, if something updates the navigation in the general area, or something else causes it to re-query, you'll see the path itself gets updated. But other things can cause, as the vehicle decide, oh, I'm in good enough line of sight here to go ahead and turn towards the next path point that's generated for me. So you'll see every now and then when it turns, when it reaches one of those yellow points on the ground, it then turns towards the next one. Turned a little early there, and When it's doing that, that means it's updating the data set that it has access to, or that it's actively reading from anyway, in order to then start behaving a little bit differently in order to make sure that it's able to make
Yeah.
turns here.
One of the biggest. Go. Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
And some of the other things that you can see going on here in terms of the behavior is those little boxes, like the little blue and the little magenta rectangles that are shooting out of the front of the vehicle. Those are related to its obstacle detection and its vision detection. Like what can I see from my position without anything obstructing it? So you'll see that the little blue blocks, the dark blue blocks, turn cyan when a obstacle is detected in front of the vehicle. When that happens, you'll see that it starts trying to go into obstacle detection mode. It's turning
Yeah, it does
very
not like
early
the
around
tree collision. We're gonna have to look into that
strange.
going into Monday.
Yep. And when that little blue box
Crazy.
rectangle in front of the vehicle hits something, it starts doing some obstacle detection, including, in some cases, the obstacle detection will be like, oh, that's not actually an obstacle I need to worry about because I'm going to turn before I reach it. Or in other cases, you'll notice that when it detects that obstacle, it'll just turn slightly to the left or slightly to the right, so it's no longer angled in such a way to hit things. The little magenta box there represents its vision. You see that as soon as we we reach a point and need to start turning to the next point, that those magenta rectangles immediately turn over to the next point because they represent, can I see the point I'm driving towards? And they also represent some obstacle checks towards those points. You see there's two separate ones. One of those boxes is to try to keep the checks to keep us on the line between our current move point and the point afterwards. And the other one is directly towards the next path point, so that we have options in case we need to decide between staying on that line or trying to drive directly towards the next point in the event of an obstacle that would make us want to just skip ahead. There's a lot of tiny little decision making that goes into driving properly that is difficult to speak it out loud, if that makes sense. You understand it when you're driving a car yourself, but when it comes to writing it down in a language that's simple enough for a computer to understand it, it's a lot more complex.
Because you figure like all of these are just running constantly. Like you can see right there how it's oscillating, and it's like, oh, there's an object here. There's an object here. Turn. And then you can see it failed in this instance because you figure it wasn't able to detect it accurately. So those are the things that we're working on going into like Monday and Tuesday, where it's like, okay, do we need to add more validation? Do we need to basically like we have to test what we're doing now? We just run tests on the map for all day. We just put our units in God mode and we just drive around and record it. Or I do it when people are doing the play test. You'll notice I'm just sitting there just staring at people while they're doing it, and I'm Twitch streaming so it gets recorded. So then that way I can pull it back up for me and Derek, and we're like, yeah, in this use case, like this was fine. That's okay. It didn't have to go to that thing. But there's something failing when it was oscillating between these two, that they're just the perfect placement from each other, that it confuses the traces, and it can't figure out, do I go left or right? And then it overcorrects, and it crashes into the Jersey divider. So like, let's see how they do here. So you can see like, okay, it detected the object. But part of it, Derek, now that I'm looking at it, might be that the extents that we're checking, it's almost like an antenna or an antler on like a sensory, or like a whiskers on a cat, where it's like we might need to make them inflated a little bit so it's not as form-fitting. So it makes more of a margin of error of like, oh, we're going to like make it a little bit wider. You know what I mean? It might be too pinpoint accurate.
Yeah, that is something I've considered using, but making it wider doesn't help it as much as you might think, because when it's making a turn, its profile changes significantly. Wide turns, so to speak, because it's exaggerated when it comes to semi-trucks, but if you've been driving in real life and you've seen semi-trucks and things like that, and how they need to make very wide turns. And it's a similar deal here to a lesser extent.
Is it an issue with the tire friction?
That is a tricky one, because tire friction, according to how the chaos vehicle physics works, does not work the way I expected it to. So it's something I still need to experiment and get more information on, because it is not very chaos vehicle explicit information about how certain physical behaviors perform, not very well documented by Unreal. So, there you saw a little bit of the new behavior, where even though it was not yet at one of the yellow points, in terms of the little science projection sphere that pops up in front of it, it still started braking, and so the science sphere started getting pulled back, because the vehicle itself was doing a check towards the turn it would have to make after it reaches the next point, and deciding that's a second situation this says I should brake, so I'm going to brake anyway, even though the sphere, for example, isn't hovering over the target. It's little projections like that that make it. Oop. So you did some decision making there in order to make it go left and right.
Yeah.
So able to make the turns there.
Okay.
So and see right here, it's going to decide. It's going to. My guess is what's going to happen because it doesn't have path points correctly to the target. Is it's obstacle avoiding the thing on the right, and then it interjects itself into the box.
So that's another failure clause. But we have this all on recording right now, so we're gonna have to take apart this video and do some more play tests because this was on the 11th hour. We were working on this all the way up to this stream. I think we didn't. Well, Derek didn't stop until probably around 6, 7.
I did take a break partway through the day, but I was sneaking in some work earlier in the day, and I stuck in a few final touches to fix up some braking issues at around 6:30ish, and then I popped in at around 7.
Yeah, groovy. So like you figure, it's still one of those things where it's gonna be very touch and go for the next couple of days. I would say that we're gonna try and do a play test probably every day going into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. They keep trying to basically find the fail clauses because we're going to fix one thing and then something else is going to act up or something else is going to be a little bit weird. Then we're going to have to course correct that, like Derek says, where it's going to be like adjusting these antlers or antennas, whatever you want to call them, to basically give more visual information. Because you guys can see the path points are correct. The yellows are correct. The problem is that you figure they're not. The driving of the vehicle itself is not necessarily taking into account, like, oh, you know what? I think I know what's going on with those trees. I'm going to have to talk with Dimitri about that. I think the tree collision itself, I think that some of these branches, hold on.
Right, while you're getting that debug up, Vibrating Cloth 76 says, so how was going from UE4 to UE5?
No, it's perfect, actually. The branches don't have collision. They optimize that. So the issue isn't that. The issue could be either the stem needs to be extended more to give it more of a wide berth, or we have to increase the size of the antlers. Those are the only two options there. What are you gonna say?
Well, on the subject of driving, actually, a repeated issue that I've been noticing here in my own tests is that there's several situations where he just decides to turn just a little bit too quickly, or a little bit where he updates his move points from one path point to the next a little too quickly, and then turns really sharp when he doesn't actually have the clearance to do that, to turn as sharply as he does. Where he wants to turn that sharply, but just like a half second later than he is actually doing it, and that seems to happen more often around thin obstacles for some reason. I think it's strange. Because you can see the navigation there that he doesn't have much, that he has a pretty wide berth that he'd want to get around that.
That seems like an antler issue.
It's strange.
Because like you figure, I turned on the debug, like this is the navigation for the vehicle, so you see how it has a wider distance bias, but you see how it's allowing it to go too claustrophobically off the nav. That's the issue.
Yeah, because that's part of it, yeah. Because what he's doing is he's looking at his nav points that are generated on this navigation correctly, but he's also moving directly from point to point in some situations, including with the path smoothing that we put onto the recast. Now at this point, it's no longer inside of the path follow component, so we may need to do some adjustments to that to see if that's what part of the problem here. That if it's
look how dangerously close those are to the navigation off. Like there needs to be a distance offset to give him. That's what's causing the failure clause and putting you into situations where they set up to fail, because like he's literally riding the line of the navigation.
He views himself as.
What's another bad car?
Because of the navigation width.
These will do.
It's basically basically the entire nav mesh shows areas where the center or the center of mass of the car can be, theoretically, according to the engine's perspective. And as such, we may just need to like widen this nav mesh a tiny bit more. That might also help. I'm not sure. Because at a certain point, if you want to include...
Well, you can't widen it any more than, I would say, because like you figure this is going to be the weight class, and we'll probably have to make a bigger one for the tank, the Abrams, if I were to guess, and the LCAC, because those had different navigations than the others because they were so large. Actually, no, I think the LCAC had the extra nav, didn't it?
The LCAC was the only thing using XL.
Oh, okay.
The Abrams still used the vehicle, in Legacy at least. So I think it'll follow out the same way here in Rebuild. Maybe get that ported over.
Oh, they asked a question about Unreal Engine 5. Do you want to answer that real fast while we move on?
Yes. So how is going from UE4 to UE5? Very laborious, to put it mildly. There were some situations in some aspects of the engine where when you're porting it, it works just fine. But even when it just comes to upgrading from a minor engine version, like from UE 4.5 to UE
Yeah.
4.6 or things like that, where some aspects of the engine update fine, but then large portions of the code suddenly have a minor thing wrong with them that you have to rewrite everything about them to fix it, or entire blocks of the engine suddenly become unusable, and you have to uh, basically just rip out margins of some of the code,
Out of gas.
get the project to build to
No,
see
no,
if
it's good.
some of the fixes that you have are even working, and then re-implement some of the stuff. From going from 4 to 5, it was a larger set of issues than that, and 5 itself also had extreme amount of baggage. To not highlight everything, especially since I don't
Oh, I
remember everything
do.
off the top of my head, but one of the largest aching pains was nanite, because nanite, with how Unreal Engine has set it up, it has a lot of issues that were not an issue for non-nanite, in terms of navigation, in terms of collision, in terms of behavior towards visualization. One of the minor issues with it that's not a super minor issue, but it was causing some gameplay ramifications, was nanite does not properly report that it is off-screen the same way that non-nanite meshes do. So when we were doing some of the behavior such as, hey, if you double-click on this structure, you select all similar structures that are on screen, some nanite structures would get selected even when they're not on screen, because nanite behaves differently. Um, that is a minor example of what happens with nanite, because it was giving a lot of issues with crashing, with physics, with it. It is its own special little corner of the engine that has a lot of very touchy aspects with it that make it difficult to work with. And in converting some things to nanite to get some
Whoa.
performance improvements, we had to spend a
It's
lot of
the
time sharpening it.
it's the path
See,
smoother.
that was like another example. That was another example of him turning. That was another example of
Yeah,
him
but if you
turning
think about it,
into
right?
being there.
If I do that again and I pause it, look at the margin there of like, yeah, he basically should have avoided these with the traces, but the traces should have moved this point to here.
But no, if you keep, yeah, the trace should be way out there, because that there, even if you draw a straight line from point to point,
Mhm.
that takes him off nav. So he's probably going to turn too early. He was already turning
He
too late there,
salvaged
so
it.
he still got around it. But if he was perfectly straight, if he was going perfectly straight into that, and
And take himself out, like right now.
So, yeah, that one, I'm not even sure what that
He
one
was trying to go. I told him to go to the airfield.
Which did he want to go? Oh, okay. Why did he make that left turn there? That's weird. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, that's better.
Yes,
So
he was turning around.
turning around, I'm guessing. Okay. Yeah, but Vibrating Cloth 76, you say at least now, then never, or very late. Yes, when it came to updating the engine version, some of the features that it has are very nice for the level designers, especially as it keeps going up in engine versions. But a lot of the pains from transitioning versions are, it gets to the point of saying, okay, updating the engine version right now is not worth it. We're going to wait for another minor version patch.
Well, we're on
Like
5.4 and they're on
I'm
5.7
just
right
making up
now.
numbers off the top of
So
my
it's one of those things where like we're waiting until probably around Doctrines. When Doctrine's done and we do a little more polish to the game, we want to update the engine version, the 5.6 or 5.7 at that point. But the biggest caution is we have to do like a dirty test where we update the engine in isolation and then we test it with a test build with probably a private group and we see what new issues present themselves, because we've had issues where like they rip out a system or they redo a system and now it's 3 times as expensive. But because no one's using the engine in the way that we're using in our TS game on the scale we have, those issues don't present themselves. Like right now, you can see that navigation tiles are re-updating because the infected's being built. We're building something, which is what those hitches are from. Because when you're in this debug mode, it makes it twice as expensive because it visually draws the rebuild tiles for debugging, so we can debug code and like see like what tiles are being rebuilt. You're not supposed to play a game and show navigation, not really, not on this scale. But you figure, so it's one of those things where it's like it's a unique situation in terms of like the issues we run into versus other devs versus just as the engine evolves, because like you figure there are enhancements and improvements in newer versions of the engine that make things a lot easier, that make the rendering and the CPU have less strain, like parallelization, and a bunch of other mechanics and systems improvements to Nanite, improvement to the PCG tool, and other stuff like that. But you have to weigh the pros and the cons. And for us, they don't outweigh each other yet. So it's one of those things where we're waiting because you figure there are some improvements they made to replication and multiplayer coding with Iris that I want to look into that would technically and compression to make it to where basically it'd make the game cheaper. But again, you have to weigh, go to 5.7, go to 5.6, and do a dirty test for a week or two and see, does half the game break? Does quarter of the game break? Does 5% of the game break? Sometimes nothing breaks. You cross your fingers and you jump in and hope you don't drown. So it's one of those things where like we have to basically figure that out. That's why you see some teams when they do Unreal Engine 5, they take a whole year transitioning to 4 to 5 because you figure it takes a year minimum, depending on the scope and the complexity of your game, because you're probably rewriting entire sections of the game. Or if you're not rewriting, you're basically like, that wasn't an issue, but now it is because now we have to jump through more hoops to make it fit within the framework of what Epic expects. Because Epic develops the engine based off of talking to people, their partners, that they go to events like CD Projekt Red and everyone else. But they also develop the engine internally based off of their needs on Fortnite. So, we benefit from Fortnite. We benefit from the technology that like CD Projekt Red and other people are doing for like The Witcher or whatever. Because like their streaming tech and their improvements eventually trickle up to basically the engine and get put out like, in 5.6 or 5.7 or 5.8 or whatever. So it's just one of those things where we're just basically like, yeah, let me just eat that, I guess. Yeah, so like you figure it's just one of those things where like it's very interesting and fun, but it's just the nature of the beast is there's a pro and a con to having an engine that we don't have to pay for because technically we just pay our royalties, and then we just get the free updates like everyone else does. So yeah, but in a nutshell, these are the issues that we're kind of running into with the vehicle. It's gonna be at least a couple more days as we weigh out, work with the community to identify any bugs that we might miss. We already have at least like 3 to 4 fail clauses. So me and Derek are going to be collaborating going into the early parts of next week to figure out how to extract the level of precision that we expect and that our community expects when it comes to the vehicle driving. Because like now, like it's good. Like it works, but it's still really cumbersome. You don't want to babysit the vehicles. You don't want to sit there and have to do this and like do small move orders and know that if they, they're gonna make a bad decision and crash over a hill and kill themselves. I already know right now I can get this vehicle to crash into the water and kill himself in probably about 30 seconds or less. So it's like little stuff like that where it's like we don't want to go ahead and just do quantity over quality. Where it's like, let's just put all the vehicles in. Let's put the Ajax's toe in. Fuck that. No. We're going to take another week if we have to and get this to a point where it's reliable and it's working so we don't make the same mistakes we made in Legacy. Where again, I'm going to beat a dead horse here. So if I can quote this back to people, I like to call me the devil on Steam, is essentially like we need to take the time to fix the systemic issues that plague Legacy, which is the Pathfinder, which is the reliability of just like their decision making, how their collaboration, because like you figure it's one thing to get it working by itself, but you can see earlier when you actually pair other cars together, what do? What's the failure rate? When do they say, fuck you, I'm going to break formation and do what I need to do to make sure I reach the goal correctly and alive? So it's one of those things that those are different things that we're looking into to just kind of iron this out and get it to a point where we're happy and y'all are happy. Ideally, it's Wednesday. If it takes longer, it takes longer. Because I'm committed to basically seeing it through that when we do scale up and we do get like the next vehicle, which will probably be the Striker at this point, then we can introduce the other levels of complexity. Because something else that we have to do going into like around Wednesday is essentially adding in the support for the Juggernaut to be able to go through objects. So right now, like, we're testing it with the Ajax, we're rearranging the table, we're making sure that he can, like, because, like, next week, one of the small things we'll do is that, like, the Ajax will be able to crash through wood. They'll be able to crash through these fences here. So these fences will start to fall. We'll start to convert streetlights, mailboxes, fire hydrants, the signs that are at intersections, like these, like those, the fire hydrants, small objects like these benches. We have to go through and we basically assign them to a weight class. So if I F11, F8, and then go to this landscapable, I believe this is a landscapable. Yeah. If I go to the landscapable, and then what was it called again, Derek, that you put in?
Let's see, for the, we have the landscapeable,
Yes, what was it called?
for the destructible landscape actors. Sorry, I was responding to a question inside the chat. For the landscapables there, right now, the only ones with
Oh, I know, but what was the setting so I can demonstrate it?
Oh, for the landscape actors, for that you go down, you search physics, and it'll be all inside the physics interaction block. See, physical interaction. There you go.
So right here, you can see this is the section that they've been building out with replication support, where it's like if it's going to break apart, like and like have a fracture, where like let's say, because the idea is that the landscapables will extend probably not next week, but sometime over the next couple of weeks as we're working on the airstrikes and getting more of the vehicles, and they'll gain a health bar. So then that way, essentially, like fracturing means that like if you hit it, a grenade will chip away at a wall. That's why the fractured geometry collection is what Epic calls chaos destruction. So then that way we can associate a chaos destruction object. So after we wake the object up, we can basically have like different levels of destruction or different actors that we basically awaken. And then the weight class is default, heavy, and super heavy. So those are like different vehicles that we associate to the landscape objects. And then that falls in line with the area class. So then that way we're like, oh, a vehicle of this caliber could drive through X, Y, and Z. And then the sound effects, the VFX, all the other fun stuff that gets played. So that way we're kind of setting the stage for being able to kind of like have some level of destruction in the game, just to make it to where it's a little bit more like impactful of like you can just drive through this wall. So that's something that we're going to squeeze in sometime next week regardless, as we're working on like the Pathfinder, because that will help that'll help minorly, but it systemically doesn't fix the problem. It's not a stopgap. It's not a solution for fixing the pathfinding. It just makes it to where they're a little bit more like, I guess you could say it's more of like the immersion of it, but it's not going to be what solves it. Ultimately, we have to just work on the Pathfinder and solve the issue of just making sure they understand how to get around these points. So that is in a nutshell what's going on with the vehicles. I'm pretty sure. Let's see what he does here. He slows down.
See, am I testing?
Yeah, no.
Make this? Oh, crap.
Yeah, it's a hit or miss if he's gonna make it, because sometimes he crashes into it, reverses, and then goes around it. And again, we might have to just make it to where they avoid those, where they just go around, and or they know to go so slow to a crawl to make that turn, and then speed up again, because that turn's incredibly hard to make at the speed he was going at. If you take into account the friction of the tires and the drag, it's like you have to slow down for those. So it's just one of those things where this is actually one of the worst areas offenders for taking out a vehicle and crashing into the water.
Should be able to do it. Here you go.
But that's a good example where like that drag and that micro turn is a good example of like he needs to slow down quite a bit more, because he could lose control there and then drive and slam into something. So it's like one of those things where like, yeah, we'll do a play test after this. And I'm going to be recording. I'm going to do a very brief, like 30 minutes to like an hour play test. We'll do like a quick little battle test and see how the game is playing. And that way it just kind of gives me a good little idea of where I need to focus my efforts going into Monday. If anything additional people spot up. I know that Krieg was bringing to my attention that if you build a motor pool too close to a landscapable, like these, the car will actually sometimes land on top, destroy the object on impact, and then go flying somewhere and flip upside down. So I know people were like discovering that bug yesterday or the day before that. I didn't even catch that yesterday. I didn't even see it, but they reported it, so we're gonna have to look into it. And I know there are other issues where, because these objects are at different heights in the ground, how they affect the vehicle is vastly different from pole to pole. So that's something else that we're going to either have to standardize or make the code more, I guess you could...
That's something that Dimitri kind of worked on here. We need to work on the interaction when the vehicle actually rams into it to send it flying, that the vehicle maintains its speed, so that for gameplay purposes, retain the
Yeah.
responsiveness in the driving. But part of the thing that Dimitri did in fixing this was making it basically snap off, where like, it places a little base mesh in the ground, and then the top part is
That would
sort of
help it,
a
yeah.
physics mesh, so that you see it snap off and it leaves the base in the ground. Yeah, that actually is happening right now in terms of visuals. So we can, if we set up the proper physics interaction or figure out a way to get the physics interaction working so that the vehicles maintain their speed when bumping these things, that will help out a lot. Because previously in Legacy, the way that Chaos vehicles were handling the obstacles here was a bit of a hacky workaround where they were using an overlap box, an invisible little collision box in front of them that was not physics enabled. But when it overlapped something from close enough, it would fake a physics interaction with it. What we're doing now is actually having a physics hit event, where when the object bumped into the other one, and the engine reports that hey, this was a physical hit, that actually is what causes it to snap off. But because that's part of the physics system, and Newton's third law says every action has an equal and opposite reaction, the vehicle could get slowed down more than we're expecting, more than we're wanting for gameplay reactiveness.
That might be the
Actually, this
linear
not
dampening
only
or
slows
the
the physical
dampening
down,
of the object. Like it could be the mass, or it could be like some of the other settings on the physics tab. We're gonna have to get into that because I didn't notice that in the playtest yesterday.
yeah, we'll have to dig into it to figure it out. One of the potential ideas that I have was basically just saving the vehicle's velocity over the last like 5-ish frames or so, and then when a physical interaction hit occurs, we also report that hey, you hit something, so restore your velocity, and then that way it would basically just revert back to the velocity it was using right before the impact, so that it looks like
It keeps its speed, yeah, its
And then-
physics, velocity.
Yeah, that would be one way to make that.
We'll have to. There should be ways of lessening the blow without having to do that, but we'll look into that going into Monday because I have some ideas for that. Because there's a physics section of the engine that we need to kind of like adjust a little bit more to push those systems a little bit further, and I think part of it is its mass. Is I think that if we lower the mass of the object, because right now all of our objects' mass are dynamically generated based off of an algorithm that Epic wrote. Right here, where it says, where is it? Ajax angular velocity. No, it might be. I think it's on this right here. Mass kilograms, and that's determined based off of the density of the object. It's some kind of algorithm that Epic wrote. So in some cases, we might have to lower the mass, and I think that if you do that, it will make it to where it doesn't impact it as much, and it doesn't affect the velocity of the object that hit it as much. Because that's what makes sense to me of like a simple way of doing it, and we just apply an arbitrary amount of mass based off of the weight class, and that should lessen the speed decrease. But we'll have to R&D that on Monday and figure out how to retain their speed to keep them moving. Because in some cases, yeah, you do want to slow them down, but the margin of speed that we're losing is like crazy. So that's something we'll have to adjust. Is there anything else you want to cover, Derek? Or move on to the next topic? Okay, so the only other thing I'm going to bring up before we move on to the next section is building avoidance. You can see that slowly but surely buildings are gaining these little yellow boxes. Those yellow boxes are essentially the AI telling the AI if you have to enter these areas, they're more expensive, and it makes it to where they don't like. Very often when you're playing the game, all the infected will just be like bunched up in one little area right here, or they'll be bunched up as they turn these corners, and it'll make it to where like they're not natural. This will make it to where they kind of flood out into the greens and the blues, and make it to where they don't hug edges. That's something that we're testing with the. Let me show you guys. Let me open up my GIF that I downloaded so I can show you guys what I'm talking about. Hold on. It should be here. Put this over here. And then open that. Okay, so one of the other systems that we were working on is a squad system for the infected, but also having it for dynamic civilian groups. It's basically an incubator system. It's also meant to make the AI cheaper because instead of doing individual queries, they're subservient to their squad manager. So the idea is one of these infected is the leader. He's doing most of the work in terms of the long form pathfinding and the long form decision making, and then everyone else just kind of clusters and moves around him. The idea is that we're trying to make it to where they're less likely to bunch up with like 50 or 100 infected right on top of each other, which makes for very shitty gameplay when it actually comes down to it. So that's something that we're tweaking right now. We started it last week, and there's still going to be some refinements going into this next week to get it to a point where I'm happy, because they do this nice clustering and this like segues here where they kind of break out, but you'll notice that sometimes they still resort back to single file lines once they see their target, and that's an issue with their calculation of their enemies. They're not spreading out their enemies enough, so everyone picks the same person they want to kill, and it makes it easy because then you figure, so the squads are ideally going to have to crowdsource their task assignments and score them based off of the characteristics of who's in the squad, like the Inspitters, like the Standard Infected, like the Brutes, like the Juggernauts. Actually, I retract that one. Juggernauts aren't allowed to be in squad because they're free agents. But essentially, the idea is of a going forward is making it to where, like, okay, they're going to actually spread. There's going to be a wave. There's going to be an actual, like, you know, a break there. So that way they're not as maintainable and easy to basically just kind of kite. Let me see if I can bring up the other video. And they'll also encircle you a lot easier. Here's the other video, actually. And then you can see the other issue is that they all kind of like skid around that corner. And it makes it to where they easily just kind of get picked off one at a time, which is why we put in the building avoidance to make it to where like they'll go around it if they can. There are some issues that we're hunting down going into Monday, where sometimes the squads can malfunction and sometimes stop. Like, if they had an investigation or an attack outside of your base, sometimes they don't get retasked quick enough to be formed back into a, like, to be given an order that is going to be moving onto your base. That's something that we're looking into going into Monday, Tuesday as well, is improving that and improving the coordination with the squad system. Because, like, if I spawn into a simpler map, because nobody wants to wait for me to, like, build a base and do all the other stuff. But what I'll do is I'll go into the pandemic test map and I'll demonstrate it live. Is that if I go and I play, hopefully Chelsea doesn't choose my starting base, and I bring up the AI debugger, she's going to spawn in about 5 seconds. She's the right circle. She's going to choose her spawn. Let's see. There she goes. So she chose where she's going to go. She's going to pick somewhere in Zone B. She was rating based off of population. Wherever she spawns, she does a weighted algorithm that looks at the people with the highest populations. And then she essentially figures out who's going to be the most delicious meal today. And then she tries to take that point, but where she spawns is random every time. You can see there's a little guy going off to build her gas tower for protection. Kills himself. Great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to kill some of our infected, because in our, not infected, on our test map, we have too many units for DPS. So that makes it to where, like, it's almost impossible for her to breach until, like, later in the days. Let me turn off numpad 0. Turn off the behavior tree. Turn off that for debugging. And then let me slow-mo so I can speed up the game. You can see her gas tower is going. It's going. Let me slow-mo a little bit faster for sake of time. Oh, fuck. Okay, there we go. All right, so you can see right now they're spreading out a little bit better than what they were before. This building, they're still kind of hugging it a little bit more uncomfortably than I'd like. I'm going to have to look into their area classes and see if I can get them to where they more favor it a little bit more, less likely. But you can see the same issue presents itself, where sometimes they still turn into the Congo line because they're still resolving probably this guy to kill. Everyone wants to kill David, and everyone wants to kill Kyle. If there was something I got to look into going into early next week, is making it to where, like, the squad's like, okay, great, you want to kill Kyle and David, I don't care. Split it up. I don't care that Kyle and David are doing the most damage. That's not effective to have everyone just go for those two. We have 100 infected. There's 10 targets here, or however many there are here. Split them up. Everyone has a a separation of duties basically to make it effective. To where like you'll get some that are coming this way, some that are coming that way, some that are coming that way, some that are going to him, to him, to him, to him. So it makes it a lot more unmanageable. To where you actually have to retreat. Because you can see right now they're favoring those two, and that makes the game too easy. I think they're also in God mode. Yeah, they are in God mode. So you figure they would have died, and then what would have happened is that once Kyle and David died, they would have went to these. They would have spiraled off randomly to these two, and then when Kyle died, they would have spiraled off to him, and then it would have been a wave to go left to right. That's not good enough, because that makes the game too easy and predictable. So that's something that I'm looking into going into next week, is to see if I can override their calculation detection, use it as an informer of like, yeah, that's great, I don't care, and basically have it to where it spreads it out a little bit here and there. So that will inflate the difficulty of the game quite a bit, because it'll make it to where you actually have to pay attention. They're going to have a lot more strategy as a human player would. Because when you play StarCraft and you play all those other games, it's obvious what you do. You want to take out the people that have the highest DPS, to have the highest guns. In some cases, you just spread out your bets where it's like, okay, you three are going for him, you three are going for him, and the spinners are going to go for your snipers and X, Y, and Z. And to a certain degree, they do a decent job at that, but there could be some improvements here and there. And then another issue that I'm tracking right now is that there still are some regressions with the performance sometimes, where you'll notice micro stutters and frame drops for the host. I'm also investigating and looking into those. And hunting them down to figure out, in the instances where they do occur, to resolve them. We are aware of it. We are looking into it. And that's another initiative that I'm doing going into next week, is to resolve those. I resolved about half to a quarter of them, last week. But there are still some that are hiding. I think it's related to the asynchronous checks we're doing for when they determine the structures. But I'm going to have to do some more testing and figure out where they're coming from and resolve those going into Monday and Tuesday. So that's another thing I'm looking into with the other things that are going on. Here, let me check my notes. We did increase the Ajax health and the gas usage for the playtests. We didn't show this, so let me show this now. So let me put an Ajax in, and I'm going to spawn some infected in. So we're going to delete you guys, because I can't believe it's not butter. We should have probably have showed that, or we were doing that very long spiel on the Ajax. Is the ramming went in. So the ramming is based off of the weight of the vehicle. It's set by the designer, but essentially as you run over infected, we'll spawn 25. Actually, hold on. I got to wait for Chelsea to spawn so the faction manager gets created. Is she in? She's in. Okay, so now I can spawn in the infected. And then you'll see that if I run them over, they die. And based off of how many you hit, you can see that it's slightly slowed down. That's dynamic based off of the weight class of the vehicle. So the idea is that, like, if you keep running them over, eventually you'll get to a point where your engine will stall out and slow down. And obviously, if you're doing like an Abrams or a Striker, it'll take a lot more to chug it up and slow it down to a crawl. It'll be able to maintain its velocity pretty accurately. There are some balance implications that we need to tweak, where it's like if you hit any part of the vehicle, they kind of like recoil and kill themselves. So if you reverse into them, they're dead. If they touch the side of the vehicle and the car is moving fast enough, they're dead. So ideally, we're going to have to refine that a little bit going into next week to make it to where it's not a walking, like, even if you tap them on the left and the right, they die. So we'll look into that and see what we can do about refining that. Because let me see if I can demonstrate that really quickly. That's kawaii. So let me spawn in 25. And then we're going to try and hit them. And you can see the issue right there, where like it killed the infected on the driver's side, but it should have probably have damaged them a little bit, but it probably shouldn't have killed them. So I'm gonna have to look into the algorithm there and refine that, because that was some of the reports we were getting from the playtest from people. I think yesterday, one of the first tests we did with the Ajax earlier in the week, is that's an issue in terms of basically refining that. Michael still needs to get in there and do the damage tables for the Ajax, so their balance is going to seem all over the place. He's working on just kind of ironing out the remaining standard infected, which I'll show you some of the meshes that got in. Chelsea, get out of here! Damn you! So you can figure like it's a lot better than what it was yesterday, because I think it was yesterday or the day before that they would die in one spine thrower volley because they had the default health amount of 100. So just keep in mind that like they have a health of a 500, but that's the damage resistances are going to be tweaked and refined going into this week as they enter more of a gameplay. They have a gameplay purpose where they're not just like glorified transports, and we added the ability for them to have the tow and the other stuff that will sneak in over the course of the week, ideally here and there. Because we still have to add in the other. Let's see what happens. I'm going to run over that blow up guy. Oh, that's weird. So I guess he doesn't actually blow up when he gets hit. So we'll look into that. He
did actually start his blow up animation there when he got hit, so he was responding as if he had died, but he wasn't popping them.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that, because he should have popped immediately and not had the chance to do it, because his charge up does more damage than the one if you kill him before he blows up, self-emoliates or whatever. So that was something else that basically we've been working on there to just basically iron out the kinks and get some of the legacy systems ported over. Derek has been working on the refinements for the Ajax infantry adjustments. I will show that really quickly in this little microcosm. Let me reload the map so I don't have to replace the assaults, and I can show that really quickly, and then we're going to move on because it's going to be rapid fire. Because it's starting to get later, I know, for everyone. Let me just spawn in. Sorry, I've been sick. So you figure if I do the thing, essentially, let's see, that one's not going to recover, I think. You can figure he's taking up his placement with the units, and they're basically forming up around him. There's still some micro adjustments we definitely need to make it to where, like, you can see that this spot right here was reserved for the other Ajax, but the other Ajax decided to not join us today. So, shame on him. Let me see if I can get him over there, and we can demonstrate that. We already know there's Pathfinder issues. There's no reason to document that again. We did that for the first 30 minutes of the stream. Let's see how they do.
When they were close enough to that building there, it seems like
then the recycler fixed it. So you can see there's a good example of what we're going for the Pathfinder. You can see there's definitely some more distance bias that needs to be applied dynamically based off of the length of the vehicle, because these are preset points that are mathematically determined. And you can see that like either one of two systems is failing. Either this Ajax should be.
I'm pretty certain the positions that they're getting are correct, but what they're trying to do is maintain roughly the same distance that the soldiers are from the soldiers' assigned positions, and it's not 100% accurate yet. It's based on some averages, which might be a little bit off, especially since they may be contributing to the averages. So it's one of those things that's going to take a little bit in order to get it.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's nobody else doing a formation system that's complicated for vehicles and infantry, so there's going to be some growing pains as we figure out like how to get all this working and get everything synchronized. Because you figure on paper this looks great, but you and I, we can all see this right now is the issue. These infantry are not detecting that they need to be further up. This vehicle is.
It's the other way around, actually. The vehicles are farther ahead than this infantry would be. So while the infantry look fine, because they're a specific distance away from their move points, since the formation actor is issuing move points ahead of the infantry so that they don't stop moving, the vehicles are farther ahead than average.
So they went ahead of their preset points.
Yeah, they're basically closer to their assigned points than the soldiers are closer to their assigned points, because the assigned points always have to be in front of the soldier, otherwise the soldier would stop moving. So getting those points specifically.
I spawned them in.
Ooh, those guys are gonna have a bad time. Yeah, so the vehicles are basically getting farther ahead than average, when they should be trying to maintain the exact same distance that the soldiers are having.
That makes sense. I want to test something real fast. It's been bugging me. I want to see what this looks like. Is there a slot there? Oh, no, that's full. Is that full? Wait. Oh, it looks like your garrison has a bug. That's weird. It's reporting there's an empty... Oh, that's weird. Okay, it's not... Maybe it's just not showing the icons.
I think what happened was maybe because it was slowed down, that one of them was trying to...
They reserved it.
One of the soldiers. And as they were... he had
this is what I was talking about for the rotate in place. Because this is a good example where they're going to sit here and they're going to fiddle fuck themselves. They're like, how do I get to that spot? But based off of how my vehicle handles, I got to, like, dance around for a while.
He found it eventually, but yeah, rotating in place, especially for micro adjustments like that, would be more ideal.
So here's a good proof of concept of ideally, when everything's said and done, what you would do with the vehicles, where you have a convoy of units that are moving throughout the city, and you have, like, you know, let's say Strikers, Bradley, Ajaxes, infantry with support. So then that way, in Legacy, you would have to micromanage all of this. Like, oh, let me move my infantry. Let me move my vehicle. So that's why we're putting so much emphasis on getting the Pathfinder for the vehicles, like, where there's no failures. So we can take the time to iron this out, because these vehicles have to be immaculate. Take into account the dynamic civilian, the civilian evacuation with the buses. That's going to be running off the same system, which means that we have to put in the time now, regardless, because those buses have to get all over the city. They have to know where they can't go and where they can go, and when to stop and whatnot, and when to wait for the civilians to come to them. So it's one of those things where, like, we're putting in that foundational work now so we can get the Ajaxes beautiful and good to go, but also we're laying a lot of the framework for the buses. So then that way, when you do get your civilian evacuation buses going, they're not going to be ramming into shit half the time or not knowing how to get to a location. So also think about that when it comes down to just, you know, getting everything situated. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of show how this would work in combat. I'm going to spawn 25, 25, 25, 25. So 100. And let's see how they do. I wonder if we're so far out from the nav that the infected are not getting the call to attack me. Oh, they did. Oh, they didn't see me. That's right. Yeah, that's the issue. Is that they can't see us because we need to do that hearing stuff we were talking about. Because the problem is that, like, you figure if they're not hearing us reliably enough. And you can see the issue right here where, like, they got really fixated on Chrissy Boy when they should have been focused on Cameron or Austin or the Humvee itself. So they make, like, really weird, like, sporadic decisions. I want to kill that one guy in the center of the convoy. And it basically makes it to where it makes the game artificially very easy. So, like, let's see if I do that, if they're going to wake up, or if they all get just narked before they even have a chance to do anything. Yeah, they're probably going to get narked. And then the other issue we know about is sometimes the Ajaxes, when they're shooting, they're kind of unpredictably really good. And then sometimes, like, these two guys will sometimes shoot people here, and then they'll break. And then they'll work. And it's like, right now, they're not working. Because those guys were meant...
Part of it is... Yeah, part of it is the guys in the back seats. Right now, they're using the same logic that they use on the Sparrow. So they're only able to shoot 180 degrees of the direction they're facing. So
I know. I'm just talking out loud so they're aware of it. We haven't had a chance to get to that because of the workflow, with the pathfinding and the more crazier bugs. So ideally, we'll get to a point of, like, get that next week with adding the tow, because that's the upgrade for the Ajax, where you get the little tow, you lower your transport capability, and then we add in the crow. And that would kind of be like our incubator for starting to get the ground vehicles that have weapons on them again. Just how we did the Sparrow. Very slow, managed rollout. I think this is beautiful in terms of the direction we're going into. And I think this is going to be really fun when you get to like actually moving through the city and having like a dense area once we get those pathfinding issues ironed out. So then that way, like, you can literally just have these really cool death patrols running through the city, just doing their work. And you can see they automatically attack. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to babysit them. They'll automatically just keep moving. Now, the only thing I haven't tested, this is probably going to break, is what happens if I do an attack move in the formation. Let me see if they're going to break. So then if I do that, no, they're working. The lost are going to shoot? Oh, they must be out of range. No, they're breaking formation. So that's going to be an issue we're going to look into because they're bunching up now. Well, that's good. That's an issue with the formation system of how they think they should be doing based off of the attack move orders. There's something giving them conflicting orders. What's weird is they're supposed to be pausing when the attack move order when they see someone. So it must be an issue only with the vehicle formation system where they are not getting the pause and resume. Because they should just stop, kill everything. They have a 5-second timer. And then after that 5-second timer runs, then they resume their patrol. So there's probably some kind of conflict going on with the formation system or something. We'll look into that. Okay, so next thing on the list. The other thing we did is that I've been playing a lot of playtests with the people on Discord, and we noticed that it can become whack-a-mole in the mid to late game, where you destroy a pod, and then you figure they'll have a gas tower and a pod up within 30 to 40 seconds, practically, after day 3 to 4. I reduced that by about 60 to 70% on the private testing branch. Now, it says private, but anyone can opt into it. Technically, when something is so volatile or something that I'm testing with people on Discord or on Steam, and I don't want to make a new private branch for every, person that I'm testing on, I'll put the most volatile stuff on there before I put it to public playtesting. Because at this point, 20% of people that play Cepheus Protocol are now playing the co-op build. So you figure it's getting to a point of a way larger adoption rate than what it was a couple months ago with Pandemic and everything else coming in. There's 4 maps now for Pandemic. So it's one of those things where I'm a little bit more conscious about putting out an update. People can't play the game for a couple of hours because I'm testing something with people on Discord. So just be aware of that. Is that if you want to test the cutting edge and right now, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Steam, you're watching on Discord, what we'll be playing after this stream is going to be the private playtesting. And then if everything's good, nothing's too crazy, there's nothing crazy going out of left field, and I can ensure that people can still play the game, there's nothing weird, then I push it out to public playtesting. So then that way everyone can appreciate it and play it and have a good time. So just be aware of that. It's something I just started a couple days ago because I was looking at the percents on Steam, and I was like, well, shit. Sometimes I can be testing some out-of-pocket things with people on Discord that are probably going to break their sessions, and they're not going to have the patience to wait for me to patch it. So I was like, let me just do that just so we have some kind of middle ground here and everyone's happy. So just be aware of that. That's a branch. You can close and reopen Steam if you don't see it right now. Let's see what else we have here. I do know that in Treasure Island, or the Bay Area map, there are some issues with the removing certain landscapables are not updating the navigation. That has been reported. That was another reason why the stream was late today. It's another reason why after this stream, I have to go get with my level designer to figure out what we're going to do so we can get the build situated, because we made some changes to fix that on the back end. But the Epic doesn't like how we're using a spline in some shapes or manner. So we have to fix some of the assets and move them around a little bit from an organizational standpoint of how they're being implemented. Once that's done, I'll cook a build for the Patreon branch and for the private testing, and then that's when we'll do the play test. So I'll be probably about a minimum at 15 minutes after the stream goes offline to get with him, figure out a direction, and implement that so we can get that situated. He's in the room right now in this stream, so I'm sure he's working on it right now. But that's something else that we're looking into because I'll give you an example. The hospital parking lot has this issue. The police station walls have this issue. Random fences have it, where like you remove it, and then you'll notice that your units will land in patches where they can't move. I'm pretty sure this was an issue in Legacy, and it was never caught for some reason. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we need to resolve this. This is really bad. So we're going through those issues right now, and that will be in the patch that we put out. So again, you'll see what I mean. Go, open up the build, go to the hospital, use the landscape tool, and then try and walk. Will you remove some of the object? You can't. And then if you type in show space navigation, you'll see that it's not clearing those objects because a flag is missing, but some of those objects were painted with the landscape spline tool. And Epic doesn't allow splines to be dynamic objects. It's a hard restriction. It's not documented anywhere on the internet. And it only breaks, it lets you do it. It lets you set it. It works when you play in the editor. But then when you go to cook a build, I can't do that. No, I'm not cooking. Go home. So then you have to basically figure out the problematic asset and then convert that asset to a static mesh instead of a spline. It's a whole business. So we're going through that right now because some objects got converted to fix the landscapeable issue. But then because they're splines, and splines are basically like roads. Think of it as like you have a road, and instead of placing down a bunch of individual elements, you place down a start and an end, and then it figures out what goes along the seams of like what does it look like. And we have a tool where it generates the sidewalks and the roads, and then it allows you to feed in assets. It basically streamlines the whole process of being able to like make roads and dirt roads and like anything roads, basically streets, really, really quickly. But it's one of those systems where we need to improve it and make our own custom solution because we're using snappy roads off of the Unreal Marketplace. And it's a really, really old plugin and a really, really old version of it. And we need to make our own homegrown solution via PCG. And that would solve all of the issues and make it to where we could, because like right now, a poor level designer has to go in and manually place boxes for every road. If we convert it to PCG, it would dynamically create the volumes for them. And it would allow us to give precision of like, this is a sidewalk. That's a road. And the designer only has to do is worry about how it looks, what assets to use, how often do you want parking meters? How often do you want stops? When do you want stop signs? When do you want a T section? When do you want an L junction? When do you want a roundabout? So you just do a bunch of flags and options. So it's something we're looking into going into December, especially for San Francisco North, so we can tear out some of those roads and use a newer tool and just make it work better with some of these systems inside of Unreal. But yeah, so there's that. That's something we're working on, something we're looking into. And let me just kind of move into the next section, which would be, we'll do the infected variants. Yeah, let me just show that. So let me load up the map. Why did I open the open world? That's just muscle memory at this point. I should have opened up Alcatraz. I apologize. Give me like 30 seconds while it opens up this map. And then I got to open up Alcatraz instead because it'll be quicker. And then I can show you guys some of the infected meshes. Now, we're going to do a Q&A. Just bear with me. I'm just trying to rapid fire get through this stuff. We put a lot of time in the vehicles, but I know that the vehicles are a big point of contention. I read the reviews. I talk to people every day. So I know that the vehicles are the biggest issue with the game. And that's why I wanted to basically spend a considerable amount of time in the beginning of the stream and bring on Derek so we can talk about what we're doing and how we're doing it to basically like solve it. You know, and it's not going to be overnight. But anyway, let me load into this map and let me put some infected in so I can show you guys what Michael's been doing. And I can give you guys an update on the infected. So let me open up little Timmy here. Show modified. Damn it, hiccups from hell. I don't know why I got those. I didn't even eat anything. Skeletal mesh. So as it stands right now, this guy is the legacy one that's going to be deleted in the next couple of weeks. Like, we're getting rid of all the legacy meshes and we're remaking them based off of the latest standards. Now, like I was saying last week, some of these infected meshes, I don't like how they're dressed. I don't like the quality with some of them and some of their blushes, some of their hairs, and little things like that. So we're looking into different packs and different things that we're buying to basically flesh them out and give them more diversity in their clothes. Something that I was talking to Michael about is potentially having it to where we do like a builder tool, kind of like what Black Mesa did for that Half-Life recreation, where what you do is you have like 5 or 10 naked versions, and then you build them dynamically in the game. That's really expensive, so it's like an R&D thing we're going to have to figure out later down the line. But it is something that we're just kind of discussing now so we can figure out what would it entail. Because technically they just added a feature into the engine that allows that, but we have to like update to a newer engine version to test it. But for right now, what we're doing is we're going to be building out the clothes and the visuals that they have on the base versions. So like you're going to see some of these clothes change. There's an LOD issue on one of them. That's a bad LOD bake. It didn't get fixed before we put it out for Thanksgiving because Michael had a lot of family stuff to go to. So that's something he has to rebake this girl in the character creator and just basically regenerate her. So we do know about that popping issue. He'll fix that. Sorry. And essentially, we're going through the infected and just dirtying them up, giving them better clothes, making more variations of them. Because ultimately, when it comes down to it, we're trying to make the base version. We had 3 and 3, 3 males and 3 females. We're trying to get it up to 20, and then that way, by designing these guys now, they're the civilians that we're gonna make look pretty later on. But essentially, these will be the people that you see walking around the city, and then these are the meshes that they'll turn to when they get infected. I believe, let me just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have our base 10 here. These are our cards of like the base 10 that Michael's using to refine and get the visuals. Now, we did tone up some of their paleness, but I like this one here. These be like, they're not like supposed to be that pale. So we're just kind of going through and just kind of finessing and editing them up, making sure that they're baked down to 1 material ID, maybe 2 at most, based off of closer LODs. So then that way they look as good as they possibly can without, having a stroke. One of the things that we're going to possibly look into is when we update to newer versions of the engine, is looking into nanite skeletal meshes just for the infected. The only thing is that we can't do that for CERC because it doesn't support translucency, which means going invisible. So certain characters couldn't cloak anymore. It's a hard limitation of nanite, but you can't have materials that you can see through. And I think it works with hair now because they added in foliage support and alpha cards and a bunch of other small little things. So it won't break their hair or their eyelashes because those are all using opacity textures. So you can see through her hair, like right there, their hair cards, essentially. So it's one of those things where we're kind of going through and just kind of sprucing up the infected and just making them look as photorealistic as we can for the limitations of them being masked the hell out. And looking into nanite, because that was introduced in 5.5, and we're on 5.4. 5.5 had a lot of issues with HLOD on some processors and some computers. So we're not going to update until we do some more testing and vetting. But you can see right now that you figure like on LOD level 0, they have a very crazy amount of poly counts for the operators. And then they drop as low of like, let's see if I can... Okay, there's definitely an issue there Michael's going to have to look into. Let me check something. Yeah, okay, so there's something going on with her mesh. So you can see in this example, that's how low they drop when you're like thousands of feet in the air. You can't make out that silhouette. So we dropped them to like basically a Play-Doh monster, a Dead Space Necromorph monster for optimization's sake. But then when you're playing as the operator, then they drop to like 33K. That's roughly the fidelity of Gears of War 2. As the Locusts were around 20 to 30K. I think Laura Croft from the newer Tomb Raiders were around 20 to, I think she was 40 to 50K actually. So you figure we're just kind of tweaking that. It looks like there's some human error for this actor because you figure it doesn't have proper LODs. So I'm going to have to get with Michael and figure out what's going on with that. Because if I drop her down, you can see she goes to 500, but the other ones don't. And that's what makes it to where it doesn't blow up your video card, where you're like, well, you're super close, so you want to take those nice screenshots and those videos and all that. They look good. But the moment you zoom out, then it starts aggressively ramping them down and aggressively lowering their quality. So then that way it doesn't nuke your computer. And that's something that Nanite does way more efficiently for LODs because it does it dynamically. So you don't even generate LODs anymore. It does it. It determines their poly count based off of where you are in relation to them, based off of like some black magic. I don't know what the fuck Epic is doing to basically determine like, hey, like that one's at 20K. Now it's at 20. Now it's at 25. Now it's at 26. Now it's at 30. And instead of having preset like numbers that you're jumping to, it's dynamically calculating it as you get closer based off of what you can see. So the front of this character is 30K, but the parts that you can't see are lower. Is my understanding of how that works. If Dimitri is here, he's a savant at that. He's the technical guy. He'd be able to explain it a lot better than I can. Right now, I guess her mesh has an issue that Michael missed, so we'll look into that. If she's not properly popping her LODs, we'll show some more progress on the infected going into next week because I hate her clothes, I hate her bun, and we're gonna have to like buy some hair packs and design them, and just kind of get them to where we can kind of, get rid of the emo goth girl outfit here. That's weird. And see what we can refine. We're going to add some more variations of like the office worker, the firefighter, the police guy, the police station guy, the SWAT officer, National Guard. I was just talking to Michael a couple of days ago for the craziness of Thanksgiving. And one of the biggest things that I was basically like getting across to him is get these base variants looking good. Establish the norm, the standards with the rebuild. And then from there, we're going to be segueing into getting the more complicated ones, which is like the military guys that have different armor stats. So if you're playing as an operator, you're playing at RTS, the riot show guy is going to take 2 to 3 times the amount of bullets to take down, even though they have the same amount of health, because you have to worry about bullet penetration, of actually physically hitting them. So those are small little things that we're looking into. Because recently, I've been playing with the Patreons and some of the public people on 7 Days to Die. And I was like, that's really... I never played 7 Days to Die, so they wanted me to play with them. And one of the things was like, hey, like that's really cool how they have like sub-variations of Infected. And Left 4 Dead did it, and that did it. So like with the rebuild, I wanted to sit down with Michael and see what we could do about recycling some of the older SWAT assets that we have. Because if I look at our SDK, I wonder if they were migrated. They might have not have been migrated. Hold on. SWAT? What was her name? That was not migrated. Hold on. Let me go to the old SDK, Legacy, and open that up. See if my computer has a stroke because I don't open that often. So sometimes there's the shader compile aggressively, but I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. Because in that way, you guys can open it up for a topic of discussion. If you guys have any suggestions or ideas for other standard infected, I'll hear them at the Q&A part. And then see if you guys have anything we didn't think of. But I think that going in that direction of having like the National Guard and like the normal BDU guys and the firefighters, where the firefighters have a fire axe, and they're flame retardant. I think somebody brought that up last week, where basically they were resistant to the flamethrower. So if you see a flamethrower guy running around, you probably don't want to shoot that guy with the flamethrower because it will take a little bit more damage to kill him. Little things like that kind of like basically like get us more mileage out of the game and make it not as like as rock paper scissory as like a traditional RTS game, because at this point we're more of a simulation than an RTS game. So it's like, why even... We don't need to do that. So you figure if I look up... what was it called? Police. If I can spell police correctly, I apologize. And if I go to the skeletal message, you can see that this is Pierce's old faction. In older versions of Legacy, we were experimenting with having police that were running around the map. I think it was in 2022 and 2023. Well, we had different classes of SWAT officers or scout. There was like 3 casts. There was the beat officer, there was the SWAT, and then there was a sniper. And basically, we had them running around as like a little dirty test, and they were basically dynamic civilian groups renamed, and it was really shitty. So it was one of those things where we kind of put them off, took them out, and we were like, okay, let's regroup this when we get to 1.4, so we can give them proper police cars that drive around. And we can just kind of focus in on give them some more sub variations and some more unique weapons instead of just being reskinned civilians. That's boring as fuck. So anyway, we're going to be taking these assets and dirtying them up and turning them into infected variations that can run at you. That you'll see throughout the city as a precursor to 1.4. Because these are assets that are already done. And it's just a matter of going through and repurposing them. And then let me see if I can find the other ones. Where are you? That's the operators. Those are the gun nuts. Michael still has to go through and do those. Hold on, who are you? Was that one of the operators we didn't put in? Oh, that might have been one of the last ones that Michael was experimenting before we cut the plug. We got to go experiment on the rebuild in January of last year. Oh, yeah, this is one of the experimental operators that Michael was playing with. Never mind. That's not done yet. Where are you? That's an operator. That's an operator. That's a Jakey boy. There's the pilot. There's the raiders. Again, the raiders are going to be coming back in as infected as well. I don't know if you guys remember these from the dynamic civilian groups, but they're basically, they all show up with the gear because Michael's always adjusting the sockets, but their outfits will be adjusted and updated. But we're just updating them to latest standards and just giving them better gear. But we're gonna use some of these as starter files to basically just get more infected variations in. They don't really have much nuance to them in terms of the infected variations, but it's really just the officers. I was looking for the anarchists. Here they are. Or it's these guys. But again, they're just more variations of civilians. Or these were like the ones from Legacy that we had, where they were just another faction that we were working on. Where they were like people that would just go around and rebel. And they were ran by Natalie. So these are guys that will convert over to an infected variant as well. And essentially just, be other guys that run around. We're just kind of going through the backlog, updating where we're updating, reusing assets where we can, and optimizing them and making sure they work for the latest standards. So you can figure this is just a couple of things I just wanted to show real fast. But the biggest thing is just converting over these 3, getting the National Guard in, and just kind of getting that situated. So you'll see that. You'll see some progress next week. They definitely won't be in, but we'll do our best to get what we can in by next Saturday. And it's a long-term goal for the mid of December. Yeah, the mid of December is where we're trying to get to a point where all of the infected and civilian meshes are done. And it's just a matter of essentially working on the weapons. Because there are some weapons that Michael wants to remodel and reanimate and get and fix the hand positions a little bit more. And then he'll be working, and then after he gets those done, and the RTS elements are situated, then he'll be working the rest of December, or whatever's left will bleed over into January. He'll be working on getting the remaining 20 weapons for the operators in, and getting the rest of their attachments in, and then adding in some new attachments to the weapons that don't have any. So him and I still want to add in the small and the M107 to the operators. So it's little things here and there that we're kind of trying to squeeze in. Because as of January 6th, I think it is a 1-year anniversary of starting the rebuild. So at the base minimum, we're trying to get to a point by January 6th where the only things that are missing are civilian evacuation and dynamic civilian groups. There's no way in hell that those things are going to be in and they're not going to be rushed and worse than they were before. And they've already said this to death, to nauseum. And we're not going to just rush, get those systems and people want them in the rebuild, and to put it poorly in, everyone's just pissy and mad at us. We're going to take the time that it needs and demands and requires. So, like I said, we'll figure out the vehicle. We'll get that going into next week. And then the rest of the week will revolve around just as we just kind of jump around and do whatever is needed for that vehicle. Let me check my list, see if there's anything else that I'm missing. Did that. Okay, we're good for everything else. So we're going to open up the Q&A. So if you have questions, and you mentioned it previously on YouTube and on Steam, throw them at me, and I'll do my best to answer them. And then on Discord, same thing. Go ahead and throw me your questions. We're going to segue into the Q&A part. And we'll do this for as long as there's questions. We'll do a maximum of, say, like 10 minutes. Let me start my timer. Okay. So if you have a question, copy and paste it in the channel. I definitely did not see it. And if you want to raise your hand and talk on voice, feel free to. Okay, I see John Carmine raising his hand, so I'll invite him.
Yes. So you talked about a special like infected variants. So I recently started playing like games like World War Z and such, and I was wondering if like a special infected of like the screamer could be a thing that like calls.
We have
a
ideas
horde
for that,
to
but
back
those
it
are
up.
off the cards for right now. Right now, we're looking at like standard infected, a lower tier infected that mid-late and changes the game in slight variations. We want to save, right now as it stands, is probably about 3 to 4 infected off the top of my head that are off limits until we can focus on them in their entirety. One is an upgrade of the spitter that's more like a witch. Another one is a basically like a husked man that runs around at nighttime and does patrols to basically in the red zones and will basically hunt down your units with the witches. Then the other one was a infected sperm whale, and then there was a chimera dog. Those are the 4 that are basically like the ones that are on the wait list because we just don't want to do more than we could do right now. But we do have quite a few more ideas because we have to find that there's enough, because we still have to put the birds and the Leviathan in. But yeah, we do have a lot of ideas for that. What else did you want to add to that? Sorry.
Also, charging type enemies will become
Oh,
a
like
thing.
the Charger for Left 4 Dead.
Yeah.
Right now, that's supposed to be the blow up guy, and he could use a little bit more improvement there. The blow up in the Juggernaut. I will note that down as something that we need to kind of. I first want to flesh that out a little bit more because there's a charge for the Juggernaut that's not implemented right now. It's never properly been implemented, and I need to find the time to implement that, plus refine Chelsea's AI a little bit more. Let me get back to you on that one. It's not a bad idea. I just want to get some more range out of the animations that we already have for the blow-up guy and the Juggernaut. Because the Juggernaut literally has an animation where he turns into the Kool-Aid Man, ramps up, and then he'll run and just knock everything down, and he'll be able to go through walls typically for the tier 1. So let me get that in there and a couple other things, and then see what's needed at that point. Anything else you had before we go on to the next question?
Yeah, if there are more aerial vehicles planned later on in the future, or if it's just basically like if it's only going to be like the Black Hawk, the Chinook, Apache, Eaglebird, and all that.
For the time being,
also like a quad.
No,
Osprey
for the time
or
being,
something.
it's going to
I
be
don't know.
those. We need to a little bit long term. I've talked about adding in the Skoloski or whatever it is, a heavy transport chopper. Forget there's a couple other helicopters that we talked about. We want to put Harriers in, or like the modern equivalent of Harriers from the LHA-6. We want to put the Predator drone in. But those are long-term goals. For like after we get the rebuild situated, then we can do an inventory of what people want and figure out like what direction we need to go into. So it's one of those things where we're definitely going to look into more aerial units long term. Okay, so let me pop you down, and let me get caught up on the questions because they've been dropping. So Quibbly asks, is there a plan to improve usability of unit abilities in squads to ease it up the micromanaging and make it easier to use them when the squad gets threatened? Derek, do you want to take that one?
Yes, something we had in Legacy that we need to port over into Rebuild is the ability switcher, which allows you to, like in Warcraft 3, for example, be able to keep your same unit selection, but change which ability selection you have inside of that unit selection, so that your command buttons at the bottom right will reflect a specific class's ability loadout, and with a tap of a button, your selection remains the same, but the listed abilities changes to a different unit type in that selection. That's something we still need to port over to Rebuild, which will probably help out considerably on that point. I'm guessing also this question would probably encapsulate the idea of some auto-used abilities, which we don't have any direct plans right now, but that's something we can look into down the road.
What he said. So, let me know if you have anything you want to add to that. So I can't. I'm gonna call you Sixer. So I don't know if it's shown or not, but it would be cool if the variants of zombies NPCs had different body types: scrawny, skinny, larger, beast ones. Just adds a bit of diversity. Could have some Easter eggs or rare spawn ones like a clown zombie or a zombie with a traffic cone on its head. State of Decay, Easter egg, mascots, etc. So that is something that I brought up very briefly to Michael with the police and the National Guard and like the firefighters, maybe some paramedics here and there. I'm gonna try and push for as many as possible for the set cutoff date before he has to go and work on some animation polish. Because we're trying to get it right now. It's at 10. We're gonna try and double it again to 20. With just the other variants that I mentioned, it's already gonna be close to 15. And then at that point, we'll diversify and see what else we can do based off of what's available to us. But you have some really good ideas, especially when it comes down to like the scrawny and the bigger ones, because then you can have like the bigger ones have a little more health. I know that They Are Billions does that as well with their 3 archetypes. I think it's like 3 or 4 archetypes that are affected, and They Are Billions. They're a good game, and you figure that's something that I've also got a little bit of inspiration from. So yeah, that's something that we'll look into long term. Let's see what we got here. Ice Money asks, why not make civilian clothes random? 10 tops, 10 bottoms, a few hats. You got tons of random civvies. Seems more efficient than designing multiple characters. At face value, yes, you're correct. But when you add in the scale of the amount of infected, how the Unreal Engine works is that if you do that, you're basically creating a builder character. You're making a builder character. Each one of those chunks has to be independently managed and I guess you could say policed by a master anim component. That inflates the cost by 3 to 4 times based off of the amount of variations or combinations of objects. That's why you see games like Borderlands or whatever. They have a very take Borderlands for example, where they have a bunch of different chunks and parts. Each one has different material IDs, probably about 2 to 3. They have different aspects of the arms, the chest, the head, the legs are all isolated, which means that you're almost building a transformer, and then you're basically having them all answer to a master anim graph, or what the chest does, the rest of the body does. So that inflates the cost of each unit by about 4 to 5 times based off the amount of separations you do in terms of how much range you want out of it. Now, there are systems built into the engine where you can dynamically merge those, but that adds a runtime cost. Because essentially what you're doing is you're building that combination of an actor, you're hitting the CPU to create it, and then you're merging it dynamically, merging the materials, so that the cost on every client at creation time, every time it's ran. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Days Gone and World War Z has preset zombies for that very reason. I mean, they're a multi-million-dollar studio, so if they could figure it out, it makes sense. But I'm pretty sure they do it that way, and even games like Space Engineers do the same thing, where they don't have modular characters because of the inflated cost of, if you go the merging route, that's expensive. You do it on a per-case basis. If you keep them isolated chunks, then that's expensive because then you're ticking and having to keep each body part in sync with the chest, which is the master skeleton. So if we had a simpler, smaller scope game with a max of like 30, 40 people on screen at any given time, totally doable. You could totally do that and have like a builder where you could just keep rotating people in and out. Are there ways of getting around that? Sure. But you figure it's going to take R&D and time to flesh that out. So on the time, what makes sense for us and our team's scope and our ability is to make it to where we just make one-offs, and like Left 4 Dead and Co. And we basically make it to where we make enough to diversify it, and then later down the line, we can always look into that tech. If something improves, it gets cheaper. Epic figures out and finds a crashed spaceship like they did for Nanite, or we can basically like improve that. So it's something that's on our radar. It's just not technically feasible at this point. Pry, you're a horrible person for that suggestion. So Pry asked, why not have the Juggernaut throw a blow-up guy? That's not a bad idea, but people are going to hate you. I'm going to write that down. So, I'm writing that down and put that on the wish list section because I do like that.
If you do like it enough, potentially we can have it as like a challenge option in the custom game settings, or it's like the difficult bonus challenge option.
That'd be funny. I like it. It's very easy to do that too, theoretically, because we just have the Juggernaut look for someone, and then we have the Juggernaut, and then we have the blow-up guy either run to him, or basically just the Juggernaut just runs really fast to him, and we have to have a snatch animation. We teleport him to the hand, and then he just yeets you, and we just basically just throw it. Yeah, that's not that bad. We'll put that on a wish list, but I do like that. I'm going to put that down, because in that way, when Phoenix dies, he gets a new way of dying. Anyway.
Yeah, because some challenge options and things like that are fun to have in some games where I want to have a harder run here. I'm having a good time, but it's a little too easy, so let's flip on some of the challenge options. And make
little stuff like that do spice up the game and interject some fun into it. So let's see what we have here. So someone asked about the AC-130. I don't know what that means. That's probably referencing the Dragon gunship Doctrine Colin, which will be coming in only after we get the remaining vehicles all in the Pathfinding Perfect, aiming for roughly around the middle of December, around the same time that Michael transitions to operator polish. Around the 15th of December is when we're guesstimating to have the vehicles in, and ideally have the doctrines, start to get the doctrines or have them in already. So about 2 weeks from now. So Christmas is going to be crazy for you guys in terms of content. Let's see what else we have here. Someone asked for a toggle option for having the Juggernauts not throw people. That's funny. What else do we have for questions? Anything else on YouTube, on Discord? Anything else that wants to throw out before I have to go run away with my devs and worry about getting this build cooked for you guys? We'll give it another 5 minutes. Santa hats on the infected for Christmas. I know we have Halloween adornments in the map. I have to double check with Dimitri. Derek, do you remember if you guys ever set anything up for Christmas? I don't think you did you?
I think we did, but it would be tricky to try to.
We won't worry about that for right now. Maybe next year. That was the same reason why we didn't do the Halloween event. Is that we had like some of the stuff is in this SDK, but not all of it, and it would take like 3 to 4 days, maybe even a week to get it all staged and set up. So we were like, yeah, maybe next year. Let's see. Let me check my list. Let's see. We'll give it a minute or two, and then we're going to wrap it up. Oh, one thing I will mention is that I think it was Seal and Atlas, a couple other cats that found the bug that they brought to my attention, is that we're currently looking out for 2 issues. One, I'm pretty sure I've already resolved. The second one we'll be testing tonight to see if it's gone forever. First one, Chelsea, when she spawns by Seal's favorite place to camp in Grid 3, which is the parking garage, sometimes Chelsea would spawn in her ankles in the floor and then never move and never start the infection. As far as I know, that's been resolved as of the patch that I put out about 24 hours ago. So roughly last private branch pass we put out yesterday. So let me know if there's any issues there, but I tested that pretty aggressively in the SDK and was able to hunt down, recreate it, and fix it. When it comes to the other issue is that sometimes the infection is failing a check where it allows them to spawn in the backline where they're trying to build an infection pod. It's not necessarily a teleport bug. It's more so it's a failure clause that allows them to complete their structure even though you killed the builder before they reach their destination. And it happens randomly. I hardened the code and fixed it last night, and I put out a build on private playtesting. So that's something that we're going to be testing for and seeing if that's gone, because it happens randomly within like 30 to 40 minutes of playing the game. So just be aware of that. We're pretty sure both issues have been fixed. That's something that I'm monitoring over the weekend. Let's see. We got 3 more questions, then we're going to wrap it up. So last 3. Can we get an option for Chelsea's start location? No for the time being. Chong Carmine, will the jug be able to throw Ajaxes when destroyed? Let me get back to you on that. Phoenix asked the question, no rush, honestly, but when did you say the operator who worked on specifically abilities? End of December. That are going to be between the 15th and the 30th. After Michael clears the remaining and special infected. After Michael clears the remainder of the standard infected, then at that point, he'll be cleared up to do animations and work on the abilities and work on the getting in the remainder of the operator weapons, and then get rid of that tremendous, atrocious XP requirements for progression on the operator. We want to get everything tightened up and everything ready to go for the end of the year. So then that way, people that are jumping in and playing the operator aren't facing an uphill battle in terms of basically even just playing the RTS element of leveling up their weapons and getting abilities. And then increasing the level cap. Because right now, the operators are leveled to 20 max because there's not enough weapons to facilitate the progress. There's not enough abilities. And there's not enough passives. So like when we do the doctrines, there's a couple of new passives that have to be added to your operators that are being missed. Like the oxygen tanks, that kind of stuff. And then there's a couple other things that are missing for there's like 20 weapons that are missing for the operators, and then like 5 to 10 attachments, some here and there for some of the weapons in different slots. So there's a lot. So you figure we're going to be hauling ass in December to just kind of get the vehicles, get the pathfinding, get the doctrines. Michael's working on the animation, getting the remainder of the infected meshes, and then working on the weapons and the operator animation polish. Dimitri's trying to get the hub, but also working in an assistant array role to help us on chaos and VFX and a bunch of technical tasks that we don't know how to do. And then Efren's working. Ideally, Efren's getting to a point in the next week where there's no more level design issues in Treasure Island, Calypso, Half Moon Bay, or the Horn Maps, to where he can transition over in the next week or two and then start working on San Francisco North. And then ideally, Dimitri would join him ideally sometime around the end of December. We'll see how it goes. Because when I was talking to Dimitri, he's confident he'll start texturing the hub and getting a little more filled in the next week or two. So we'll see how everything holds, because we keep pulling his ass to help us out on the VFX stuff. And we keep pulling him on the vehicles, because he is our specialist when it comes to the vehicles, physics, materials, particle effects, you name it. Anything that requires a technical artist, that's Dimitri's purview. Let's see, is there anything else that I need to bring up? I think that concludes it for today's podcast. I'm going to go get with some of my devs so we can get a build out to you guys, and we can do a play test for about 30 minutes, maybe an hour. See what kind of data presents itself. You guys can try out the vehicles yourselves and just see how it feels on the private testing. If everything feels good, there's nothing crazy, I'll push it out to public testing. So again, thank you guys for coming. We greatly appreciate you guys coming and seeing what we're working on, sharing your feedback. Transparency is always important to us to kind of show what we're running into, what kind of issues, and X, Y, and Z. If you want to consider supporting development, consider checking out our Patreon, consider checking out our Discord pledge system, or YouTube, or buy merch on the store. Try out the support packs on Steam. Anything helps as we're kind of getting through this rebuild and balancing it out with our day jobs. And we greatly appreciate you guys. We do this for you guys. We love the game. We love where it's going to be at the end of December. And we just ask for a little more patience as we work through these growing pains of getting the vehicles where they need to be. And again, I will put out in a playtester ping in the playtester role in the next, ideally less than 30 minutes, 15 minutes, but no promises, because I have to go get with Efren and Derek for possibly a little bit of time and figure out what we're doing so we can get these patches out for you guys. Yep, that'll conclude it.